The life of a meme requires its involvement with two distinct procedures. After birth, it transitions from the pre-objective to the subjective, spirals through trend cycles, seeming to gain speed, until it falls to a type of death, objectivity. Simultaneously, the pendulum of interest swings from demographic to demographic. Such processes resemble two distinct waveforms which, over time, disappear due to a loss of resolution. The resonance becomes too high to hear.
You don't want to do another tide.
The meme cycles from base to cringe and back again. Internet memes and cultures provide us with a more comprehensive representation of the nature of ever-present networks, undulations, and cycles. They describe how one unit within a network can push the pendulum of interest and taste from one demographic to another. And because of the internet, we can see shifts every other week rather than a handful of instances throughout our lives. Some mediums are still faster than others, with the image being a relatively rapid art form. Fashion, film, and music are a bit slower, with written and oral communications behind them. But overall, our tastes are changing faster than they have in the past. Memetic cycles are now so quick, the formula so well understood, and visual literacy so high, that the funny is unfunny, the unfunny is funny, the unfunny is unfunny, and the funny is funny simultaneously. So-called truth, humor, and interest are dependent on your memetic geography, and therefore the performative value of an act is dependent on your demographic sync. As the waveform continues, the next based opinion will be pro-current thing, as it is the most important psyop to be understood, and one's response to it will be heard. Later, the individual will take on another anti-position, likely arguing that one's position in the culture war is futile, and so on. I predict that it must necessarily continue as all negations do. The psyop is the truth is the psyop. Order is negated, expounded with every iteration. Can this cycle be stopped by an internalization of this concept? Some are exhausted by going through the motions of social politics and attempt to surpass the current thing, build an immunity to its power, and willfully decide to curate their vocabularies in their minds. This mindset encourages a sensitivity to technological indulgence whilst maintaining intentional observation of its content as a means of reaching enlightenment. But can the gnosis movement also be categorized as a trend? And is it therefore doomed to become distasteful, corrupted, dead? In some online cultures, there is talk of the omnipresent schizo-psycho wars, which have been pulling the strings of humanity. Social cycles of based to normie to cringe to based, or humor cycles of funny to unfunny to radically unfunny to funny, can be applied to the cyclical rhythm of relevance in philosophical movements, mirroring the cycles of creation and destruction, or reincarnations. Positions of power are passed between the schizo and psycho, but not without resistance, determining or resulting from based and cringe categorizations. The normie may also receive positions of power, a job title anyway, but lack the innate will for true power. This usually occurs between switching periods as a talking head for the schizo or psycho. It is generally understood that the schizo is the rightful and merciful leader, but an underdog, as the psycho is in power, at least publicly, a majority of the time. The psycho works to satisfy id, the schizo superego, and normie ego, which implies a collective waveform between the levels of consciousness alongside tastes. If this phenomenon describes the endless passing of power between the superego and id, it must pass through ego each time and therefore twice as often, making the normie population the highest. The three primordial archetypes are distinguished for their relevance in our era. The reason for their existence or relevance means that people want affirmation that even though the schizo's irrationality is considered crazy, he can see beyond the tactics of manipulation and propaganda. If he is going to believe in the irrational, it will be of his own creation, chosen, beautiful delusion, making him a god of his internal memetic universes. The normie will never see such beauty as persuaded by his external delusions. The psycho is one who could see if he so chose, but would rather kill his dad and fuck his mom. A meme admin once told me that laughter is a channeling of the ecstasy of being. All jokes share the same root being as existence. Any modifiers are used to make you specifically appreciate things as they are. If such a perspective is determined to some degree by cultural waveforms, schizo posting's increase in popularity is a large-scale paradigm shift from the rational to the irrational. or at least its fashionability for the time being. Regardless, this shift should be embraced with hopes to prolong the period before the psycho decides a new leader. In an examination of the views of cultural cycles, I've been superimposing calendars from different disciplines. But from which angle are we reading the wave function? Should the steps be read 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 2, 1? Though they represent the same thing, some can be more intuitively read in terms of arc and others Y value. For instance, schizo, psycho, and normie must be occurring in this order, so they would be expressed in units of arc. The correlating ego, superego, and id would be represented by the phase shift of the wave function. The unit divisions of the y-axis may prolong the good or bad times. Viewing the function from this angle can allow more flexibility of the waveform, so that one may suggest a direction of their preference by altering the position of the repeating center. If there is a meme god, or a god which is experienced or expressed through memes, it may be the only one which demands a blood sacrifice. Wars require battle cries for the maintenance of memetic polarization, admitting loyalty to one, reification of the other, and the fear of treason. All acts of violence, regardless of scale, can be traced back to an illness or disorder of cognition. Complications of lexical specialization involving a complex, mature conflict are elusive in their red herring linguistic loops, which distract one from its dualistic perpetuation. Therefore, the only way to subvert the context begins with severe and complete alienation. You rise and rise and rise to find that the path you've been walking was predetermined by two ever-complicating swirling structures, extruded into a labyrinth with one path and two possible directions to walk. But the entrance and exit are the same, and who's to say it's any different out there, better or worse? You've only known what it's like in here, and so has everyone else. And even then, you know little about how the walls grow around you. And when you return, you are without the pressures of family members or friends or the commitments you've once made. You've been completely uprooted and neutralized. And the next bit is the fun part. You will build a home right where you are, and one with all the extravagance and comfort you can manage. You will sow the lands entirely of your creation and have something certainly in front of you now, in your cave or tower or space between walls or between sky and ground. This might be as far as I've gotten or hope to. I probably haven't achieved it yet. I haven't decided what to do next. Maybe I'll take a walk this way or that, but I know that whichever direction will become more of my home, and how much home is too much. I could stay there forever and build more homes within my home, but then it becomes difficult to walk again. Either way, it's much better than running the race. Sometimes runners will stop by for water and a snack, maybe tea or a meal if they have the time. And I feel deeply that they do admire my home, and with some jealousy too. They wish that they could have a home so lovely and extravagant and comfortable and here, where I am, and where you are, in the labyrinth. But they must go before it's too late, stuck running forever in some direction within the body of the thing. And as you approach sleep, you have the sight of an egg with a natural marking on the shell, a spot which creates an uneven tension under your eyelid, a pinhole in the camera, a pinhole in the cave, a poking from outside the tent, which pushes and expands the iris, which then blinks open to reveal even more eye, and as you open your own, sight has grown to accept multiple octaves. You are familiar with this sign, and it is affirmed when you find the blueness and the lightness of your hands. You visit one by one your parents, friends, and crushes as they lie in bed asleep. You push their hair away from their faces and give a cheek or forehead kiss. For a special few, you organize pranks or leave your special symbol somewhere along their belongings. Once finished, you run with no aversion but the friction allowing your feet to find the ground, to the East River, curling over cars and characters with increasing specificity as they appear. You jump incredibly high, arc, and inward dive with masterful pike and perfect apina through wet miles of crudely cut and rearranged slabs of rock, which seem more organic as you descend, but still have the man-distinct rectangular touch. You release all of your air to continue sinking. You shrink but feel more solid here than you did on land. After hours of your descent, you find first a field of air as contained by the blocks, which abruptly end here. It is held by arches and columns which create a complete circular reflection in the still water. The rows of columns stretch far past the ability of sight and compress infinitely into a horizon. You return to lightness and allow yourself for a moment to get lost in the arched labyrinth. After a few breaths of air secondhand from the absurd orientation, you give into the hot bath beneath, slowly expelling any perceived security or life from such breath. You only see dark for many moments. Once the deep blue becomes many, you are in a forest of bone pillars expanding above and below into spaceless dark. Above, you see the complex silhouette of a fish and imagine it to have the striped pattern of those exotic characters you would see in an aquarium. You see schools of more regularly shaped fish and assume they swim together to heighten their collective intrigue. You find their coordination exciting, though you become jealous when imagining how instinctive and efficient their roles are and how much fun their sex must be. They get smaller and smaller with your sinking, and for a while there are no more inhabitants. You spend time admiring how one white tree can twist so elegantly around another while both are able to conduct their arborous expansion towards the sky. Then you meet the sweet little sucker fishes who, with their transparent bodies, large bubbly heads, and electric glowing brains, love to give you little kisses as they pass. course, there is also the curious squid who is peeking at you from time to time behind the branches, showing nothing but its sullen glass human eyes. And eventually the trees shrink to the size of small trees, and then bushes, and then shrubs, and then grasses. You must move out of this mess if you want to continue going further, so you do, and continue to sink, watching the mass sharpen to a point, and far away now there seems to be a glow at the end of it. You swim closer to meet a creature with a body like a dolphin and a head like a deer, though hardly resembling either creature. You realize that its antlers expand upwards, making up the whole of the forest, the connecting hall of columns beneath the city, and everything above. Aware of its godlike authority, you don't ask it about its upholding of New York, or is it the whole American continent, or the future or well-being of anything above. Instead, you ask, do you know why my hands are doing this? You are referring to the strange lines that pour from your fingertips. They aren't always there, but tend to look the same. Endless transparent hairs or spider webs or thin trails of incense, weightless but still reacting to their surroundings. You first notice them after a long day home alone, and your first instinct was to dance with them, twirl them gracefully in the air the way you would imagine a woman to dance with ribbons during a pagan holiday. You say, my friend thinks that I am emitting something like energy or spores, but I feel that I may be tied up in someone or something's biddings. The creature then spoke with a quiet but clear voice, which seemed to still the water containing us. Smiling, it said, you're both wrong. It's just the water moving around you. I know you want to follow its trails to find who or what is at the other end pulling your strings, but the source would actually be in the opposite direction. And so you thank the beautiful beast and take this as advice. Using your unreliable hand threads and unreliable stinging salt eyes as your navigation devices, you walk across the ocean floor in some direction for a very long time. You don't see the same silly fishes or their goth deep-sea counterparts, just water until black. You keep turning around to see that the creature's antlers are still within eyesight, so you don't become too lost. It becomes an instinct of comfort. You never realize, but you spend 3 days total walking towards the source. Things become so fundamental. Ground, not ground, hand compass, antlers, that the pattern sustains itself without your conscious input, continuing independently until you become suspicious of your success. The creature didn't appear to get much further the entire journey. So you reason that you've been walking in circles, chasing a random and changing current.